afternoon, all. And today's video is on one of my autistic special interests. And I'm going to start with how this particular special interest of mine became discussed by Ann TM, aka Elizabeth Oyer, and her co-conspirator lawyers and law clerks on a blog. Now, in case none of you are familiar who Elizabeth Oyer is, she was President Joe Biden's lead pardon chief in the Department of Justice and the White House, and she recently was fired from that position by President Trump. Now, we're going to start here because she has been portrayed by one of the mainstream media when she went whining to the mainstream media about having been fired by President Trump. And she's got a lot of skeletons in her closet. But let's start with this. Biting my tongue because I work for the appellate court that could hear her case, and I have access to her pleadings below. And that was posted on this blog here. So Ann TM, aka Elizabeth Oyer, says, Galloper, email me. I want to talk about this stuff with somebody and not feel guilty. And so Ann TM's co-conspirator law clerks here, like Tawanda, said, I have this insane obsession with meeting her in person, like anyone up for a trip to Florida. And so here you have this Elizabeth Oyer, who was a law clerk for the Honorable Stanley Marcus, 11th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeal judge, with her co-conspirator law clerks, one of which apparently was a law clerk in the 6th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeal, saying they're stalking me. They're going to cross state lines and come into Florida and stalk me to where I live. So that's the first thing. Galloper, trip to Florida. I Yahoo mapped her address off the pleadings. I know I'm an evil child. It really does appear to be a boat slip. And that all was posted on this blog here. Pixie Dust says, she seems to be smart but lacking some sort of connecting element which negates any real reasoning power, if that makes any sense. I have no doubt that she is mentally deficient in some way. That was posted on their blog here. Tawanda says, is it even possible to read 5,000 cases without making your eyes bleed? Do you legal eagles even think there are 500 ADA cases out there? Quietly Irish says, no, she said 5,000, not 500. There could be that many given the number of years the ADA has been around, I guess. Lord knows, I wouldn't want to have to read all of them. All she is proving is that she is completely insane and has far too much time on her hands. Get a job, freak. If she really had all those financial problems and you couple that with the fact she's batshit crazy, she'll never be admitted to the bar. Give it up, nutbag. Tawanda says, oh, I meant 5,000, sorry. You know, I can't type, especially with all the CP hoopla. You think you aren't getting any work done. Try feeling all the rabid email requests. NTM then says, I have free Westlaw, so I will check. Running off to log on to Westlaw. Okay, there are about 10,000 if you search in all federal databases. If you search in just federal appellate courts and above, there are about 3,350. So yes, I suppose she could have read 5,000 ADA cases. Sad but true. And then she launches into her own discussion about an ADA law review. Guess that means me and CP don't see eye to eye, huh? Milkwarts then says, she read 5,000 cases on the subject alone. Please add to her list of disabilities OCD. Interestingly enough, there are many aspects of practicing law where one does not need to go to court regularly, if ever. Why doesn't she pursue a career in those fields is quite beyond me. That was all posted here. Then Antiem says, if she actually does have some sort of ADD, then that's wickedly ironic. And that's posted here. Antiem says, I have a bizarre fascination for CP. On the one hand, she's certainly a hoot, but on the other hand, I feel bad because she's clearly crazy. Maybe it's the psych major in me, but I find myself analyzing her posts, reading and rereading them, trying to figure out what her deal is. She's definitely not an opinionated gal. She's off her rocker, no doubt. And that was posted here. Now, what you can see is this law clerk assigned to my case in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, Antiem, a.k.a. Elizabeth Oyer, was an undergrad psych major. So she's using her psych degree to try to diagnose what kind of disability or medical condition it is that I have. And so far, one of her co-conspirators said, oh, she has OCD because of her intense hyperfocus and interest that's abnormal in its intensity on Title II American with Disabilities Act cases, ADA cases. And then the other one says, wouldn't it be wicked if she had ADD, which is what is commonly called today ADHD. Is this proper for a law clerk to be making diagnoses of a litigant's disabilities and medical conditions, which is being fed ex parte into the court and the court opinion that's being written about this litigant? Is that proper? Was that proper for Elizabeth Oyer and her co-conspirators who are lawyers and law clerks to do that? Now let's look at my autism diagnosis by Michael Hoffman, MD. And that is here. And one of the things he says specifically is that I don't just have ASD, but splinter savant traits, especially in art and legal abilities. And he signed it. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means that I have an obsessive special interest, an intense focus, a hyper focus that's abnormal in intensity on the law. Okay, we'll leave the art special interest aside for now. We're going to say the law. Because I had this special interest in the law, I went to law school to become a lawyer and took and passed the California bar examination. So a special interest does not necessarily develop into a savant ability, but it can, and that's on the higher end of the spiky autistic profile. And what it means when you see a savant ability is it means that it's a special interest that the person is obsessed with and passionate about, has hyper-focused on, that's abnormal in intensity. And not only do I have a special interest in the law that's documented in my autism diagnosis, but as Antiem, a.k.a. Elizabeth Oyer, and her co-conspirator law clerks and lawyers recognized, I have a special interest in Title II American with Disabilities Act cases. And let's look at what is a special interest. In the DSM-5-TR, Autism Spectrum Disorder Diagnostic Criteria 299.00, under Criterion B, restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities as manifested by at least two of the following, currently or by history. Examples are illustrative, not exhaustive. See text. Number 3 is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, e.g., strong attachment to or preoccupation with unusual objects, excessively circumscribed or perseverative interests. Now, when Ann TM, aka Elizabeth Oyer, who states in her blog post she was a psych major, so she had this kind of training as an undergraduate. When she and her other co-conspirator lawyers and law clerks are trying to figure out and diagnose what it is that my disability was, or my medical condition was, then she apparently got one of those, of so many overwhelmingly medical and psychological, psychiatric programs in the United States for decades and decades, and even up to the present, often do not give their students any autism spectrum educational training whatsoever. And that leaves these people, as they go on into professional careers, to diagnose people, especially females, who are autistic, especially those who have been misdiagnosed before or are undiagnosed. It leaves them unable to spot the autism spectrum disorder staring them right in the face. It leaves them uneducated and unprepared to be able to tease out the nuances of the female presentation of ASD. But here they're talking about the abnormal intensity and focus I had on Title II American with Disabilities Act cases. That meets the DSM-5-TR Criterion B number 3 diagnostic criterion for ASD of highly restricted fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. And so, there you have it. I meet another criterion, but since criterion C says symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities or may be masked by learned strategies in later life. I've also posted a video on my special interest in horses. And that started when I was about 2 years old and started really getting an abnormality, so-called, in intensity and focus. By the time I was 6.5 years old, it has continued throughout my entire lifetime. And that also meets the DSM-5-TR Criterion B3, special interest. So I also meet DSM-5-TR Criterion C, that the symptoms were present in the early developmental period. That I had highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. My special interest in horses. And so I also have something to say. When these other co-conspirators of Ann TM, aka Elizabeth Oyer, were saying, add to that OCD. Well, OCD can be mistaken for ASD criterion B3. What is the difference? Well, in OCD, they are intrusive and unwanted thoughts, but my special interests are enjoyable, and I want them and I seek them out. And that's the difference. That's why it wasn't OCD and why it is ASD, autism spectrum disorder. Another one said, well, wouldn't it be wicked if she had ADD? Well, it's true that these days we know that ASD and ADHD are co-occurring in many, many autistic people. I have never been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, but I have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder by Dr. Michael Hoffman, MD, who used an ADIR, ASD diagnostic test, the gold standard, as the basis for his autism diagnosis, and in his own words called it a, quote, autism diagnosis, end quote. And so this video is on my childhood autism trait number 6, which was my special interest in horses. So you would have to call this 6A, my special interest in the law, and 6A1, my special interest in Title II American with Disabilities Act cases. So that's my video for today. If you like my videos, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, and you'll be notified of my future videos. And thank you for watching.